Okay, so when you go to the doctor, they jot down some notes in a file. Seems pretty straightforward, right? But what if I told you that file, your clinical record, is so much more than that? It's actually a legal document, a story of your health, and it holds a kind of hidden power, a double-edged sword that most of us don't even know exists. So let me ask you this. Who do you think really owns your medical history? I mean, the hospital has the physical file, your doctor writes in it, but the actual story inside, the data about you, whose is it? The answer is way more complicated than you might think, and figuring it out is absolutely key to understanding your rights as a patient. So before we can even get to the whole who owns it question, we gotta back up a little. What is this thing really? Well, your clinical record is part of a tradition that goes back thousands of years. It's your personal health story for sure, but it's also a scientific document with some seriously deep historical roots. This quote right here, it just nails it. This is the entire reason medical records even exist. From the very beginning of medicine, doctors knew one simple truth. If you don't write it down, then for all legal and practical purposes, it never happened. This isn't just some dusty old philosophy, it is a core rule of medical practice to this day. And believe me, this has been the rule for a very, very long time. I mean, just look at this timeline. We're talking 1700 BC in Egypt, where they were already documenting cases systematically. Fast forward to ancient Greece, where Hippocrates started creating structured histories, separating what he observed from what he felt. It kept evolving, and then bam, in the 19th century, with tools like the stethoscope, the clinical record transformed from just a story into a scientific instrument. All right, so that's the history. Pretty cool, right? But how does all that ancient history matter to you right now? Well, today, that record has become this incredibly powerful legal tool. And it works in two really important ways, as a shield and as a sword. Now, to get its legal power, you need to know this little phrase, lex artis. It's Latin, and it basically means the law of the art. In medicine, it's the professional standard of care. Think of it like the official rule book for doctors. It's the benchmark they're judged against in any kind of legal situation. And what's the number one piece of evidence used to prove whether a doctor followed that rule book? You guessed it, the clinical record. And this is that shield and sword idea in action. For you, the patient, the record is a shield. It makes sure your care is consistent, it documents everything that's been done, and it protects your right to know. But flip that coin, and for the medical staff, it's their shield. It's their main legal defense to prove they did everything right, that they followed the Lex Artis. It literally protects both sides. So you can see why a sloppy record is such a huge deal. An incomplete or inaccurate file isn't just bad paperwork, it's a legal landmine. Remember, what isn't written doesn't exist. So if a doctor performs a procedure but doesn't document it, legally, it's like it never happened. That can be interpreted as negligence, it totally weakens their legal defense, and most importantly, it can put a patient's safety at serious risk. Which brings us right back to the huge question we started with. We know this record is incredibly powerful, but who's actually in control? Who holds the key to this critical document? And here's the answer, which according to Mexican law is kind of mind-blowing. It's an ownership paradox. Check this out. The institution, the hospital or the clinic, owns the physical document, the paper, the folder, the digital file itself. But the information inside it, your data, your results, your story, that belongs to you, the patient. This is the single most important thing to get. They own the paper, but you own your story. And because you own your information, you have real enforceable rights. You have the right to access your record, to see it. You have the right to get copies, your data has to be kept confidential, and if you see something that's wrong, you have the right to ask for it to be corrected. These aren't just nice things a hospital might do for you, they are your legal rights. And they can't just toss your file in the trash when you leave. In Mexico, the law says they have to keep your clinical record for a minimum of 5 years after your last visit. This makes sure that your information is there if you ever need it down the road, whether it's for future care or something else. So you own your data, you have these clear rights. Sounds pretty solid, right? Well, let's talk about how you actually enforce those rights. Because there's been a really big recent shakeup to the system that's supposed to protect them. So in late 2024, a major reform got rid of an institute called the INAI. Now, what was the INAI? It was basically the independent referee, the watchdog, in charge of making sure everyone, including hospitals, was transparent and gave people access to their information.
If a clinic refused to give you your records, the INAI was the place you'd go to appeal.
This slide really breaks down the practical difference. Before, with the INAI, you had an independent body separate from the government handling your appeals. It was free, and they had to respond within 20 business days. Now, the new oversight body is part of the executive branch of the government. The response time has more than doubled, and if you want to appeal their decision, you're looking at a potentially long and expensive court case. The independent referee is gone. So what does all this mean for you and your rights? Well, the law still says you own your health information. That part hasn't changed. But the mechanism to enforce that right, that independent watchdog that had your back, is no longer there. The system is now slower and totally lacks the independent oversight it once had. And that leaves us with a really important question. In this new landscape, how protected is your story really?